developments and opportunities in the submarine, cable industry, global and the regional views. I have the privilege in inviting our distinguished session chair and moderator, Shri R. Shakya, Additional DGT, LSA Haryana, Department of Telecommunication, Ministry of Communications. Let's put our hands together, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome our distinguished chair and moderator. I also invite our eminent panelists, Mr. Tarun Chitkara, Vice President, Regulatory Affairs, Bharti Airtel. I invite Mr. Ranjan Banerjee, Chief Investment Officer, Lightstream, and Mr. Vishwanathan Ramaswamy, Vice President and Head of Technology, Strategy and Planning, Global Network Services, Tata Communications. I think so we'll have to wait for our panelists to join us. Ladies and gentlemen, for the next session, we have on the stage with us our distinguished session chair and moderator, Shri R. Shakyaji, who's Additional DGT, LSA Haryana, Department of Telecommunications, Ministry of Communications. Inviting our panelists, Mr. Tarun Chitkara, Vice President, Regulatory Affairs, Bharti Airtel. Inviting Mr. Ranjan Banerjee, Chief Investment Officer, Lightstream, and Mr. V. Vishwanathan Ramaswamy, Vice President, Head of Technology, Startup and Planning, Global Network Services, Tata Communication. So ladies and gentlemen, without wasting any more time, while our panelists are joining us, we would like to go ahead. And it is my pleasure to introduce the session chair and moderator for this panel, Shri R. Shakyaji, Additional Director General of Telecom, LSA Haryana, Department of Telecommunications, Ministry of Communications. Sir has led various telecom initiatives across regulatory frameworks, digital infrastructure, expansion and spectrum management, and we are honored to have you moderate this pivotal conversation. And over to you, sir. The time duration for the complete session, which also includes the question and answers, is only 50 minutes, 50. Over to you, sir.
So good afternoon, everyone. After listening the extremely knowledgeable dignitaries in the inaugural session, I'm sure the energy level has already gone up with all of you. We'll try to meet the same spirit and the same wavelength. I'm privileged to be part of this group of eminent speakers covering the investor, ILD operators, startup I should say, the connector of the basic subsystems. So, the first session has already gone slightly longer, so we'll try to reduce it and make the session of around 50 minutes. We will have around 2 sets of questions to individual and then open the floor for the discussion and interaction. Just to set the scenario after listening in the first morning, are you ready with the presentation? Okay. So let me tell what the background is. We all know what is the need of the data in the world. We all know that the contribution of communication in the economies of the world varies from maybe 12% to 25% in many of the countries. Today, entire financial and economic center is dependent on the communications. in addition to the other sectors as well. The growth is so exponential that every day there is a requirement to add more and more and more assets. Now, if you see the comparisons of the last decade and the forecast made of the requirement for the next decade, you will see somewhere in 2014, the world had around 300, say, OFC cables in number, which in 2024 has gone over 500. Now, in morning, you had listened even the current figure of the 669. Right? Similarly, you see the capacity. It has gone from the 50 terabytes in the 2014, and the expectation in 2034 is over, I said the petabyte, several petabytes, that is what we are expecting. If you see the requirement of the likely expenditure to be incurred or the capex in the three different stages, in 14, probably the 1.5 billion USD was adequate to have this infrastructure. If you take the 24, it went almost double, 6 billion, and anticipated around 12 to 15 billion. So that is the landscape of the submarine cable. If you look into even the operational maintenance requirements globally, there are huge amount. Again, in the three stages, if you want to see, it varies with 1.5 billion per annum to around 3 billion in the 24-25, and likely to touch around 6 to 7 billion in the, right? So what is important is that one thing is common, and you all are very learned audience here. This gathering has the complete information, what is the criticality and the role of the catalyst kind in the economy, in the sovereignty of the nations with the submarine cable in the today's world. With that background, right, let us try to see that how the specific geopolitical considerations makes the thing different. Similarly, how the data sovereignty requirements make these altogether different kind of the sets, the obsolescence of the technology, the innovation in the new technologies. If you go 20 years back, most of the systems were PDH, went to the SDH, right? Then to the DWDM. Now we are asking of the space division multiplexing. So technologically, you had gone multiple layers high. The same system which was able to deliver hardly, say, few gigabits per second are able to deliver today terabits per second. The new cables which are being planned are having the capacity of over 200 TBps per cable. So that kind of the expansion is there. But then there are environmental related issues, there are regulatory issues, there are concerns relating to the control and the position of the cable landing stations, the routes, the actions by the actors, maybe state actors, non-state actors and all. And then the position of the India, which is the fastest growing economy, the fifth. We are aiming to be third very soon. And the kind of position strategically in terms of the physical location, in terms of the relation, irrespective of the two wars going on, whether this is a your Ukraine versus Russia, or it is Israel versus Hamas and others. The kind of independence in the decision making of the country makes the India very strategic in the nature. With that background, now may I go to the global player, Mr. Scott, who is representing here the Meta, with the request that in his perspective, what are the critical considerations for the India to make decisions, as well as the bigger challenges which whole world is facing? If you can put on.
Wow, how much time do we have? There are a lot of different factors there. So, I mean, when you look at the subsea industry as a whole today, right now it's going through, an unprecedented, explosion of growth. We had the dot-com, boom in the early 2000s. Then really there was a full dearth. Things started to slowly pick back up again in sort of 2015. And now things have just exploded. So I think one of the overriding challenges that we're seeing isn't necessarily in the manufacturing capability of the suppliers or in the landing providers, but in the tonnage, in terms of both the installation capacities and also in the repair, which has been brought up a number of times. Those fleets are aging. They're not being replaced. We're not seeing net new tonnage, which ultimately is required to not only install the critical capacity that we need, but also as more and more systems are going into service, the ability to repair them within acceptable timeframes is becoming a bigger and bigger risk. And that's without even considering, really horrible scenarios in which you have intentional sabotage or coordinated sabotage. So I think that's, one of the big issues. I think the other major issue that we're facing, and I alluded to it in my opening talk, was unfortunately we're seeing timelines for development go backwards. The distances, it isn't that the technology and the cables itself that are making them more difficult to install. It's actually the regulation, and this isn't specific to India, but regulation across the world is generally becoming more cumbersome. And that's both in the installation, but then also in the operation. So the amount of overhead that goes into that is making it very, very difficult. And that's for a player as large as a Meta or Google. And let me be very clear about this. Meta and Google do not want to monopolize global subsea cables. We in fact need there to be a healthy ecosystem of other, cable and consortium owners in the business. And if we're finding it difficult to navigate the increasing complexity of regulation, policy, permitting, et cetera, how are smaller players, expected to do that? And that includes, some of the, if we're talking about India specific, some of the requirements for, raising bonds on vessels, for a debt finance consortium, suddenly asking for, many tens of millions more to put up a bond on a vessel suddenly makes that project much more difficult to pass the business case. So there are a number of issues there. I think the other, topic that was also touched on in the opening speeches was there are a number of key hubs today that are just too congested. I mean, literally they're at a one cable in, one cable out type of scenario. We've got to, as an industry and India specifically, we have got to establish new, scalable and protected hubs that have streamlined permitting and regulatory processes.
Thank you, Scott. Now, may I move to the next speaker, who is our on from the live stream, and I would like to have the perspective from Mr. Ranjan Banerjee to know about geopolitical, financial, economic, and the regulatory concerns applicable globally, and more specific if they are in India, taking your experience in initiating the work, having the relationship with a large number of the countries and operations.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's a very, very relevant point. And just taking off from where, Scott, you left, I think the point, the mood of the industry is upbeat just now, right? It is, as Scott said, is in the super bullish phase and unprecedented growth. And, money speaks more than words. And in the recent past, we have seen large amount of investments coming in the sector towards, for example, Keppel Investment Fund, they bought out maintenance company. Large private equity players like KKR, they invested $400 million in similar, maintenance companies. So today, it is a challenge in getting, if you want to lay a cable system and you need installation ships, you would probably be locked out for 3 years if you want to go and find one now. So there are real bottlenecks. People are trying to, and just on the supply constraint side. But coming to your point regarding geopolitical and other areas of potential what we see around. And geopolitics is one area which is getting increasingly complex, right? So increasingly the battle between the large supergiants is making its mark felt in the subsea space. So today in the morning we heard the South China Sea issue. Right? Today, if you want to have a cable which is going to passing through South China Sea and trying to come to US, it's going to be practically impossible. We have issues on the Red Sea side, on the other side, which is of India, where we have a lot of sabotage and geopolitical risks coming to situations which are emerging there. Coming back to on the east side of our country, we have places where today getting just permission to do a landing, for example, in Indonesia. Today, if you want to land a cable, the regulations are very difficult. And those landings are getting monopolized across Southeast Asia by a large number of essentially incumbent players. So these are not conducive for a global kind of an industry, which really kind of seeks to connect different countries across open seas. Now, coming and bringing that back to India, therefore, in this situation where globally the geopolitics is becoming hard, regulations are getting stiffer. In India, just like it's a shining beacon in terms of economic activities, if we work towards making the regulations a little more easier, I think we can go a long way in making India a real kind of hub in this area. I mean, just think of it. You go 1,500 kilometers west of India, there is Oman. And Oman is a population of just, 5 lakh people. In Delhi, we have 30 lakhs, 3 crore people in Delhi. And with such a small country has 14 subsea cables landing there. Right? On the other side, Singapore, we have 26 subsea cables landing. Regulations, if we play that well here, at this stage when globally the world is becoming fragmented, I think we can take a very good lead in making things work out in our country. I think I talked about geopolitical, that's primarily what we wanted. Yeah, finance and economical. Look, financially, what we are finding is a lot of investments which is happening in subsea space is becoming more private investment led. So today, large players like Meta, for example, the Waterworth project, it's a private project, right? A lot of these investments being hyperscaler led, we see a lot of when I say private, I mean individually, privately owned and private capital provided. In some of the parts of the world, where especially in the African side, multilateral development funds and banks provide capital, they are there. We also see the debt providers are still cautious, but private equities are gradually opening up to the space. But again, I think a lot of the growth, a lot of the investments are now driven by hyperscalers, and therefore, more private capital driven as opposed to public capital driven. So that was on the financial side. If you ask about the technology side, I think the technology side, what we are seeing is really, essentially 3 things. We see openness, so open cable landing stations, everything around the openness that we talk about. flexible infrastructure and sustainable practices. Flexible infrastructure in the sense that, so earlier, as someone talked in the previous sessions, we had cables which were really, 8-core kind of cables, and even earlier 4 cores. But now we are talking about 24 fiber pair systems, right? So spatial multiplexing, advances on that side is now leading to much more capacity per cable as opposed to what we used to see before. Newer areas like NEC in the morning talked about multi-core cable systems. So those are coming up. There are experiments getting done on a completely different type of cable systems like the hollow core fiber. Those are things which are coming, but those are not, right now there are very few. It will come in the future. Maybe the immediate things which we see is more around multi-core cables. We see some C plus L band deployments, and we see, really number of fiber pair in the cable systems increasing, leading to much more capacity.
Thank you, Ranjan.
Can I just add a fun fact? So if you look at from a technology perspective, if you look at the capacity of the .com era subsea cables, which are now coming end of life, versus the new generation of petabit cables. So if you applied that same growth in capacity combined with the number of terabits that you can get on each fiber pair, and you equated that to a reduction in flight time, it means that in that same period, so early 2000s to now, a flight from London to New York would now take less than 5 seconds. That is the scale of the growth and the capacity and technology in subsea cables that we're seeing.
Yeah. Thank you, Scott, for adding. Now, after hearing the experts from the global perspective, let me move to my right and make a request to Mr. Tarun Chitkara, who is our ILD operator and also the owner of the submarine cable representing Airtel or the Bharti Airtel Limited here. And how do you perceive the South Asia scenario, considering our physical situation? We have concerns in going through the South Sea or South China Sea side. We have concerns going on the other side. And the third is only Singapore, where we have almost 25% of the traffic get hampered if anything goes wrong. So in that scenario, how, as a company, you perceive or face the challenges with respect to the security of your assets, with respect to return on your investments, and the regulatory concerns, if you can throw some light.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. First, I think I'm sure that not only the Airtel and all the ILD operators, they have taken care about the redundancy part. So, we ensure that, let's say that if there is a cable cut on a particular, place, then we migrate that traffic, to the another cable. So in the past, we have faced the situations, and there have been scenarios where 2 or 3 cable cuts have happened of a particular operators, then the operator migrates to another ILDO. So as an ILDOs, we have agreements with each other to ensure that in case of cable cuts, even for some few days and and for a longer periods, we are able to ensure that the international traffic is not affected. So that part is the redundancy part. The second is the security. I think there is no doubt at this point of times that the major cables, or almost all the cables, are landing only at 2 places, which is Bombay and the Chennai. They have their own reasons because the infrastructures, the land, now you have put up the resources and all the stuff. So I think there is a need where both the central and the state governments need to work together and come out other locations also, like we can pick up Gujarat, we can pick up Kochi, we can pick up Calcutta also. But then the land acquisitions has to be there. So somehow we need to create some sort of incentives there. The operators feels that it is more, it makes a business case to go to the other location also, because you have to create a new infrastructures there. So today it is more logical for any operator to come to the Bombay because you have the existing infrastructures, you have the manpower there, and, and even the ecosystem is working very fine. But if you have to go to the new locations, so you have to create everything. I think that can only be done with the support of the government, both the central government and the state government. The security is definitely at the international level is a genuine concern, but which we believe that that is something India as a nation need to take care about it. And I'm sure this is not specific to India issue. It is specific to every other country issues also. And I'm sure that the governments together are taking the respective actions at their levels so that in case of any scenario as far as the international traffic is concerned, it is not impacted. Now coming to the regulatory side. So as far as the location is concerned, there is no doubt about it that we are sitting at a very strategic locations where we can attract huge investments. And we are doing it so also. But yes, if we compare ourselves with Singapore and Hong Kong, definitely they are able to position themselves as a transit hub, which we also need to do that. But for that, probably the government needs to compare what sort of incentives they are offering compared to what we do that. Let's take an example of license fee. Now here, any ILD operator is paying 8% of their revenue. If you go to the Singapore, the license fee starts about 0.5. First, there is a very nominal fixed fee, then 0.5, and the maximum license fee is 1% if you cross a particular revenue threshold. If you go to the Hong Kong, you go to Canada, Australia, the license fee is very nominal. So you need to ensure that our regulatory cost is almost similar to other countries so that any operator who is making the huge investments find it more attractive to come to India and do that sort of thing. Second, our regulatory policy also need to be comparable with the other, countries. Let's take an example of protection zones. I think in the previous sessions, a lot of people have talked about the other countries take care about the protection zones so that there is no unnecessary cable cut. We also need to take care about that situation. I think 1.5 years back, the TRI made a wonderful recommendation on the submarine cables. This is the high time the government accepted. I think if you accept those recommendations, most of the issues would be resolved. So that's from our side. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarunji. We all know that the Tata Communications Limited has been the backbone for the all international traffic for years. They had seen the days from the monopoly to the today's competitiveness. So I would like to have the view from my good friend, Mr. Viswanathan, about the, again, first, his perspective on the South Asia, or in fact, the Asia-Pacific kind of the networking, the resilience, what they have in the existing systems of the consortium, and then going towards the privatization investments. So over to Viswanathan ji.
Thank you, sir. So essentially, like Tarun said, we have an advantage from a demand perspective. There is no issue with respect to what India has to offer. But on the other side, it's a sort of a catch-22. On the supply side, while we have enough capacity that is required, and in the morning, also we heard from some of the speakers that at this point in time, maybe we are not sort of short of capacity in the country. That's not the main point is how do we maintain this and enhance? I think that's where we have a challenge. And one of the key things on operating in the South Asian region is that, South Asian region, probably some of the most populous countries are there in this particular region. Hence, the per capita consumption is going to be pretty high, right? At the same time, it's also one of the regions where you have the maximum political diversity, political and, regulatory diversity between the countries. There's no commonality. And that's one thing which, a place like a Eurozone they enjoy that because they have come together to create a common, structure from a regulation point of view. And there is a sort of a predictability and a uniformity in the regulation out there compared to what, because we are in a place where we need to keep adjusting our regulation based on what is happening around us, right? Hence, there is a fair amount of uncertainty with respect to our regulatory approach. So I think one of the key things that is critical is to see how we can manage the regulation at par with what is there in all other countries in the world or similar countries in the world. If we have to promote us being a hub for transiting and even for consumption, because if we are going to be one of the largest consumers of internet bandwidth in the world, even for consumption or for transiting, it's important to treat this particular industry as good as like a export promotion. The type of incentives that are available for export. When you transit, really you're exporting. Actually, you're not exporting goods, but you're exporting services. Essentially, something comes from other country and then passes through our country and gets out to another country. Essentially, you are promoting exports. So essentially, how do we create an export promotion type of regulation for transiting traffic? Second important thing is also our port of landing, like what Tarun said. We have majorly Mumbai and Chennai. Most of the cable systems land there. One reason why other places where people have tried and it's not become very popular is because the point of consumption is quite far away from the place of landing. If I take Kochi, it's very strategically placed from a port, but the place of consumption, say Bangalore or Hyderabad or Chennai or any of these places where the industry is available. The ITITS was the first set of industry which promoted international consumption and then followed by all other industries, right? So the points where the consumption happens are quite far away internal, and that puts a lot of constraint on the internal network itself, the national network. So you have to augment the way that you build a resilience, you build the capacity in the international part in subsea cable. You have to match that with the level of resilience, with the level of capacity that you build in the internal national network, right? And like you said rightly, we are one of the country where the growth is good and the growth is also bad, because the amount of infrastructure work that happens out here in this country, the number of fiber cuts that happen in the terrestrial section today, that it adds to cost. One is that it adds to the disturbance. Because of that, you have to build a lot of resilience, and because of that, the overall cost goes up. So essentially, we are one country where we get probably the least per gigabyte of consumption. The revenue that you earn is the least per gigabyte. But probably because of all these factors that I was pointing, probably we spend the max per gigabyte to land into the country because of all of these factors, because of the terrestrial cable system, the regulatory reasons, the cost of repair of subsea cables, all of these complexities sort of we end up probably being one of the most expensive from an international bandwidth perspective, right? So I think we have to make these things at par with what is there at our neighboring countries or in the regional countries, if you want to really have that ambition of being an international hub for internet traffic, like the way Singapore is or the way even Egypt is, right? So if you have to become somebody like that, we need to ensure that the other important factor, sir, is also the sometimes conflict between the central government and the state government. And one such thing happens right in Mumbai, which is the most important undersea cable hub, right? There has been a long-term conflict between the local regulation and the central government regulation with respect to the undersea cable. So I think these are things which we need to ensure that we take care of for this particular sector to grow.
Thank you, Viswanathan-ji. I think let me try to assess capacity versus demand. We all know over some 77 cables are already under the processing of getting deployed, under construction at various stages. all the big players, including Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, is heavily spending or making the investments in the cable. Now, given the scenario wherein at one hand there is increasing demand, the economic factors are being controlled by the big players, how you look the balance between the small players, small countries, in terms of their financial involvement in coming up with the better networks and bridge the real digital divide, maybe in the African region or even the Asian region, where many countries are still suffering from the basic part of the internet or the broadband requirements. And I would request to be little brief from all of us so we can really finish in time. Please, Scott.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and certainly when we look at markets like Africa, to an extent India, we're seeing huge organic growth. Going from a couple gigabytes prepaid, mobile, 3G, maybe 4G connectivity, to now actually getting fiber to the home, and you're seeing that individual consumption going from 3 or 4 gigabytes a month to 300 gigabytes a month. And when you multiply that by many hundreds of millions of people in these markets, you're seeing just huge organic growth in capacity needs. Certainly Meta is, when it comes to Africa, obviously To Africa cable, which hopefully most people in the room have heard about, and a number of, partners in the room have been a part of developing. Will be going fully PA, and that, that really is a game changer for the continent. But it won't be the last one. There will be more to come because there is still so much more untapped penetration and data intensity. I think, for India, we've already seen, a massive increase in egress. But, when you start talking about the introduction of AI, I think that there's another step change. So in terms of how do we, bridge the digital divide? So I mentioned cables like Project Waterworth. Yes, that is a private Meta cable. That is us basically trying to catch up with demand. Does that mean that To Africa, on the other hand, full consortium, many players. We will continue to look and rely heavily on local partners for all of our cables, whether that's in the form of providing landing provider services for which capacity is then provided, whether that is in the future looking at consortiums trying to encourage the ecosystem in some of these developing markets. These are all areas that we are looking at. As I mentioned, it is becoming more difficult, it's becoming more expensive, it's becoming more complex. We want a healthy ecosystem. We depend on those the smaller players for diversity from our own cables. So we have every interest in ensuring that smaller players and growth markets are served. And I think that's one of the key things is we are trying to be more proactive in our investments now. So even though you might not see the demand today, we know that there are markets that are going to, at some point in the not too distant future, experience the type of egress explosion that India has in the past 5 years, and we want to ensure that we get there, and we're working with local partners, including on the terrestrial infrastructure side, which, as I mentioned, is equally important in terms of the reliability, to ensure that's in place, and from a Meta perspective, that all users have the best possible user experience.
Thank you, Scott. With this, since we had heard there's a requirement of the huge investments, also the partnership with the local players, how as the operator, I would like to go to Mr. Tarun, as an specifically international long distance operator, you consider these large or the huge investors vis-a-vis the traditional business you had been doing in the international market on the submarine cable side?
Good question. The Airtel is a product of the competitions. 25 years back, when we came as operators, and in fact, thereafter we have done many fest. Like Rahul was in the previous sessions talked about it, that we were the first private operator who made an investment in the submarine cable. So today, because we also understand this fact that submarine cable is a serious game, so you need the serious players with the huge investments. So today, it's not that Airtel is working in isolation. So we have many ILD operators who are making the similar sort of investments. So if 2-3 more operators are coming, making the investments, to be very honest, we welcome them. And I'm sure that there would be many opportunities we can work together. The only precursor should be that the rules of the game should be the same. So, the regulatory framework, the security requirement, till it is the same, as an ILDO, whether I'm acting as a traditional ILD or somebody is acting as a OTT players or hyperscalers, it doesn't make any difference, to be very honest. Till we are doing the same thing, we are subjected to the same regulatory regimes, we are fine for that, and we welcome that.
Thank you, Tarun. See, what we had seen, the life of an average optical fiber cable undersea is about 25 years, right? Now, at the same time, there had been advancements on the equipment side, including the power feeding side as well as the terminating equipment side. So what is your take in terms of increasing the life of these kind of assets, so the investment can be really made more useful and return can be more assertive? Over to my friend Ranjan.
Yeah. No, look, the point to note is that, while there is this so-called 25 years life of fiber submarine cable, but it is not that something is going to fall off in the 25th year and then 26th year you can't use it, right? It's really the economic life, which means that when the cost of running that cable exceeds the cost of the revenue that you're generating from the cable. And that's the real point at which things drop off. And there are many, many examples where the capacity of the cable over the lifetime has been stepped up significantly to be able to kind of sustain and make it more useful. A classic example of that, I think, is CMV3. Right? CMV3, we all know it lands in India, but it started with the 40 gig system, right? From there, through series of kind of interventions that happened through in the early 2010s, we had this coherent directions, and then better modulation, QPSK, 16 QAM, and so this capacity of the cable system significantly increased from 40 gigs to hundreds of gigs to terabyte scale, right? So it is that this capacity increase. To the extent the fiber pair, so the number of fiber pairs you can't increase, but how much of traffic you can push through the fiber pairs, you can increase by changing at the line in SLTs and that end, and therefore, kind of making it more, carrying it further. The likelihood of submarine cables and the cost of maintenance, the O&M charges, they will go up. The revenue is capped because, beyond a point, your capacity is capped. And therefore, there is a natural limit to what you can do, and newer cables then start becoming much more attractive, and you'll not carry it beyond. There are some examples of carrying a cable beyond 25 years, but there are not many, right? So not many, because in most of the cases, it is often found that it is much more economical, much better to go to the newer cables, which are there now, far more efficient, cost efficient. Cost per terabyte, cost per byte is much better to carry on the newer cable than in the older ones, and therefore doesn't make any more sense. So that's where it is. It is not so much technology, but economics which drives, when the cable falls off.
Thank you, Ranjanji. We had heard in morning about the recommendations of TRI, especially with respect to the setting of this cable landing stations. Also, maybe the licensing or the authorization in the two buckets, one for the lender, another for the point of presence, and the others. Now, you, being the first entity in the country which had the cable landing stations, based on your experiences, how would you like to reflect on those recommendations?
Sir, see, the ILDO licensing that's been there in existence for the last 25, almost 25 sort of years, already contains all the necessity bells and whistles, all the required security controls, etc., for traffic to come into the country or get out of the country to anywhere else in the world. So all the required controls do exist as a part of the existing regulation. Now, yes, we should sort of ensure that the regulation keeps pace with the requirement, and there are modifications that are essential based on the advancements that happen in the technology and all the other ecosystem development that happens in the industry. It is important. One thing that we need to keep in mind is, like what Tarun was saying, whether you bring the traffic into the country for a consumer, for an enterprise, or for a specific application or a specific application provider, still the possibility of what can go wrong there, is the same, right? If there can be a breach, in a consumer business, consumer, mobile network that's being carried by Airtel, or an enterprise connectivity that is being provided by Tatacom, or Facebook type of an application that's being provided by Meta, the breach that can happen or the compromise that can happen is the same. The possibilities are the same. So hence it's essential that whoever does, whichever type of name you want to call it, authorization, license, whatever you want to call that. I'm just purely talking about this, from a business view, from a philosophical view. So essentially, it has to be the same, irrespective of who the operator is. If you have certain type of regulatory requirement, legal requirements, security requirements, safety requirements that we are putting in for a cable landing station that's being built by an Airtel or a Tatacom versus something that's being built for some other purpose, I think the requirement of the regulatory requirement should be the same. Now, for enhancing the business in the country, you want to simplify some of these requirements, and that should be then done uniformly across whosoever is bringing it. If you are relaxing a certain set of requirements or modifying certain requirements to suit the current demands from the market, then that should be the same for somebody else who was doing it for 25 years should also get that, the similar type of an advantage. I think that's all would be the ask from, incumbent cable landing station players, sir. That's all I would say.
Thank you, Vishwanathan ji. Since the time is less, may I open the floor for the questions? Okay, first I think, kindly introduce yourself and then put a brief question. Since we have 5-7 minutes, let us be very brief in the question. You can take this mic.
Okay. So about the TRI recommendations, those are very useful, but they are of June 23. So it is almost 2 years and still nothing has been done, which shows the kind of preference which we have for building the infrastructure. That's point number one. Point number two, there is a need to create cable corridors across all the coastal cities, particularly Mumbai and Chennai, where the pre-approved corridors, where anybody can come and can lay the cable without asking for environment clearance or those 51 approvals. So those 51 approvals need to turn into a pre-approval kind of thing. Thirdly, the kind of capacity which is now running in and which is going to come in future is going to be in terabytes, petabytes and whatnot. So what is the monitoring requirement for the capacity? That needs to be rationalized. Otherwise, the cost will be very horrible. So that rationalization, what is the actual purpose of your security monitoring and what kind of security monitoring should be there, that also needs to be done. So these are some of the suggestions which I have. So I wanted to give Praveen Sharma from GCX. Thank you.
Thank you, Praveen ji. I was expecting question, but the good suggestion. I think on the second table back. We'll come to you. Please.
Yeah, thank you. My question to Scott is, yesterday China revealed a device, cable cutting device, which can go up to 4 kilometer depth, which Aruna Madam also flagged. What do you think about what the governments of the Quad countries, India, Australia, Japan, and US, should react to such display of maybe a devastating technology that can happen tomorrow because of some conflict in, say, regarding Taiwan and all. And my second question to Ranjan is, you talked about mostly led by the private finance, this is happening. What do you think Government of India can do to enable more public finance to it? Do you think there should be some mission mode type, like we have a semiconductor mission where Government of India has put a loss of money? Can it be such kind of mission be helpful for this subsidy? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Ujjwal Kumar from Cuts International.
Fine. First to Mr. Scott.
Sorry, so just to clarify the question, what should we be doing? What countries?
What is your prescription to the governments of the Quad group, the Australia, India,
Yeah.
Japan, and
So he's telling
USA?
what is the take on the actions of some specific geography
Yes.
through the association of the Quad countries, that is the Australia, India, Japan, and the US, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, there are two general global hotspots in the world that, you know, we're not just Meta, the entire industry is concerned with. One is the Red Sea, Southern Red Sea, which unfortunately is where all the cables go through today, and then the other, which has been mentioned earlier today, you know, South China Sea and the 9-dash line. Maybe some days it's the 10-dash line. Who knows? So I mean, one of the objectives with Waterworth is actually trying to avoid reduce dependency on those geopolitical hotspots. So that's where you see, I think, countries like South Africa, countries like Australia suddenly becoming, and India, obviously, being you know, stable, a very stable, you know, hub in the middle, are increasingly going to be important in the coming years, as opposed to those traditional routes. Obviously, there's a lot of talk, and I know, you know, there are a number of high-profile cables like Blue Ramen that, you know, are trying to well, go through the Red Sea, but then also go through sort of Jordan and Israel. Well, that's also still, you know, not what I would necessarily call a stable region. So I think you're going to see a proliferation of new innovative routes trying to avoid these hotspots. Now the problem then comes, you know, when you have latency sensitivities, how do you overcome that? And I think that's where you need to start looking at what you're putting on the edge, how you develop your edge content distribution network, where you place data centers, where you place actually, you know, that AI. But those are the main concerns.
Now, Mr. Ranjan to respond.
Yeah, so I think the idea is not to kind of say that we should get public money or government money in kind of creating these infrastructures, because private capital by definition is more efficient, right? So, but the role that government should play and can play and should play is that it should facilitate the deployment of such private capital, right? And instead of creating, you know, some hurdles around this way. And all the regulatory stuff that we're talking about is effort towards facilitation. There are others which we may not have talked as much. For example, giving some tax incentive, because this is an infrastructure investment. This is a long-term investment. It is beneficial for the country at the end. It should get some tax holidays, some incentives. So those sort of stuff which then brings more private capital to play would be the right way of going rather than coming in with own government capital towards a sector where anyway private capital is available.
Thank you. I think there was a question. Yeah, please. We are already short of time.
Yeah.
So,
So
maybe
my-
after this, one more question.
My name is Manoj. I am Principal Advisor in Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, TRAI. So this is with Mr. Viswanathan. When you said there's no uniformity, you expect more uniformity in the recommendations from the regulator. So it was not clear to me at all. We thought we were always transparent, non-discriminatory. And especially when it comes to these 51 approvals, the regulator has nothing to do with it, isn't it? It's actually the government. So could you make it a little bit clear? Uniformity among the operators. I just couldn't get it because we thought we were absolutely uniform. Thank you so much.
Actually, we can talk about it later during the lunchtime in detail. I was talking about uniformity from a regional perspective, trying to work along with neighboring, governments as well to ensure that there is certain amount of uniformity with respect to handling subsea infrastructure. That was one of the things that I spoke about. I also was speaking later on about commonality between the existing ILDOs versus the new incumbents. We'll talk about it, offline, sir. I have very, very specific point. We'll talk about it offline.
So the last question from the gentleman in the end.
Hi, my name is Raj. I'm from Uconnect. Two small questions. One to the operators, to the existing operators, both Airtel and Tata. It seems to, this is my personal opinion, that it seems that you have lost appetite to invest more in subsea cables, or the intent is somehow not visible. For example, Tata is investing more in some other systems rather than subsea cables, except for, of course, refurbishing those which are existing. And Airtel, after the first one, I2I, this thing, we haven't seen any major investment from that. That is one to the operators. Second to Lightstorm and Meta. Are you, in your strategy, do you also plan to invest something on onshore investments to complement the landings, the subsea cables you are investing in the region? These are two small questions.
Yeah. Any one of you?
About Airtel, sir, I think it would be very unfair to say that we are not a serious player. In fact, you pick up the major ILD operator, there are only 3 or 4 who continue to make the investment. So as far as the Airtel is concerned, I really don't know whether you have seen the presentation given by Rahul, is that we started this journey in 2001. We were the first, private operator. We have made an investment of more than USD 800 millions. We are bringing new 4 cables, to take care about our future requirements. So as far as our, business is concerned, we are very much taking care about that thing. And I can assure you that, we will continue to invest whenever we feel that there is need to do more investments, sir. Thank you. Yeah. So as far as the future is concerned, like say that we have around 8 submarine cables, and I don't know, you saw the presentation of Rahul or not. We are going to bring new cables also. In fact, we have already applied to DOT. We have taken the in-principle approval as well. So that part is processed as far as the future requirement is concerned. Thank you.
I think to supplement him, the Airtel, as per the presentation made by Rahul, is already a partner in 34 submarine cables all across the globe. So it's not that they had stopped at I2I. I think. Would you like to?
Yeah, I mean, just in regards to your second question, the very simple answer is 100% yes, which is why I keep mentioning, the importance of, the symbiotic investment between terrestrial and subsea. Meta's strategy is to get as close to the end user as possible. That doesn't mean we're trying to displace the carriers, but as I mentioned, it's more efficient. We want to try and take the burden off their backbones, carry it on our own. So that means, most populations don't live around the CLS or the SLT. So we absolutely are investing, including in countries like India, in very extensive terrestrial networks, which is why, players like Lightstorm sitting here next to me, and other players in India, around the world, that are terrestrially focused, are absolutely critical to our overall strategy of reaching more people with better quality user experience.
And just to follow that on, just 1 minute on Lightstorm. Lightstorm is operating one of the, a very large network in India now, close to 40,000 kilometers of fiber, connecting over 65, 70 data centers, carrying hundreds of terabytes of traffic, and we have deployed $100 million in developing this network in India terrestrial, right? We do believe that today cable systems, submarine cable systems, are no longer CLS to CLS systems. They are data center to data center systems. So unless you have a good terrestrial network which is as reliable, as robust, the chain is as strong as the weakest link. It will not work. So the reliability of the terrestrial network is paramount for subsea network to be successful.
Thank you. So we are not taking further questions, but maybe in just yes or no, can I put one question to each of my panelists here? To Mr. Scott, considering the current ecosystem of the world, do you feel India should consider the manufacturing of the submarine cable here, as was discussed in the inaugural session? Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. Let me come to the right, to my friend from the TCL, Mr. Vishwanathan. We know about 150 cuts are there in the submarine cables. The nearest ship available for the submarine cable is the Singapore, which we used to call. And anyway, there has been some wrong information shared in the first half. So let me share. There is a standard operating procedure to obtain the various clearances, and as per that SOP, all the clearances can be obtained within a week in India. So kindly follow that SOP. If somebody is not there, they can seek it from the security cell of the DOT. That is one. Now my question is, there was a requirement that India should consider to have its own repair ship kind of the facilities. So what is your take on that? Yes or no? Not much discussion.
No, yes, that's one investment that the government can make. Actually, what somebody asked, what the government can make.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Tarun, the question for you is, there was a talk in morning again, I'm referring to the inaugural call, that is, we must have the connectivity between the terrestrial cables and the submarine cables, and or allowing the submarine cables for the domestic purposes. Your take?
I think we should do that. I just give an example. For example, I have the submarine
Just
cable.
yes or no, because I think we are already
just 30
time
seconds. Like for example, I have a submarine cable which is touching Bombay and Chennai. Now, even I have the capacity there. I cannot use that cable for my domestic traffic. It should do that. Please do that.
Right. To just sum up, there is a huge requirement, huge investments are available. There are the opportunity for all of us to work on the cables manufacturing, to work on the laying of it, because hardly 4 or 5 countries are there, or the companies are there who are doing the installation work all across the globe. There is a huge market potential for operation and maintenance of that. Many of you may not be knowing, my friend TCL has been the center for maintaining many submarine cables. So entire data flow is being checked by them, and wherever issues are come, they are supposed to comply. So even for the operation maintenance, there is a huge requirement, and the market is going to be by 2034 is around 7 million. So with this, I think what we want to come together is, we will request the BIF to make these recommendations, what the panelists thought or what the suggestions had come from there. And I'm sure with this, we will be able to make the country proud. leading in the submarine cable from 17 to maybe not 170, but at least 70 we can go. Western part is already open for this thing. Open access policy, I think the people have little confusion in the morning. Country already allow the open access policy. There is nothing like that. We do not have the open access policy. I think ma'am was there in her guidance itself. The things came on this discussions. So future is very bright. Something which India is also required to do, since we have to have the data sovereignty, instead of relying more on the submarine cable, we have to serve as the host to rest of the people to serve, and the data center policy have to come out in such a way that we can really have, because even the small countries are having in the Western world with that business, and that business is again in the hundreds of billions. And I request Meta, who has been the partner of this event, to find out the local partners, do the business with them, make a sound ecosystem, and probably as a chair of this end, I would request and like to recommend the VIF only one thing: let us have the standard operating procedures for seeking all these permissions, so they can be fast and they do not take much of time. With this, I think we had already exceeded about 7-8 minutes from the scheduled time of the 50 minutes. I would like to thank all my panelists here. Thanks a lot for their valuable inputs, their insights this year, and all the audiences who had been wonderful in this class. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
a
very
lot.
much indeed, sir. I will request our session chair and moderator, Mr. Shakya, to kindly do the honors of presenting mementos as a token of appreciation to our eminent panelists. We present to Mr. Tarun Chitkara. Shakya, sir, to kindly do the honors. We present to Mr. Ranjan Banerjee. We present to Mr. Scott Colling. And to Mr. Vishwanathan Ramaswamy. And I would request TV sir to kindly do the honors of presenting a token of gratitude and appreciation to our distinguished session chair and moderator, Shri R. Shakyaji. And I would request all our panelists to kindly come together along with TV sir for a group photograph. And ladies and gentlemen, we now break for lunch. As we are already running behind schedule, we would request the lunch break for 30 minutes only. The next session will commence at 2:15. I would request everyone to kindly be seated back in time for the next session in 30 minutes from now, and the session will begin at 2:15. Thank you.